The acceptance letter slipped from my sister's trembling fingers, fluttering to the marble floor of our family's penthouse like a dying butterfly. I watched from the hallway my own acceptance letter, to the same prestigious university but with a full scholarship and early admission, clutched in my hand. Maya's face had gone from triumphant pink to ashen gray in the span of a heartbeat. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're supposed to be taking the exam next year. You're only 17. You can't." But I had. And in my previous life, I hadn't. In my first life, I'd been 18, studying for my entrance exams with Maya's borrowed notes because she'd accidentally spilled coffee on all my textbooks 3 weeks before the test. I'd failed spectacularly, scoring just below the cutoff, while Maya, using my original notes, the ones I'd painstakingly compiled over years, had soared into the top percentile. She'd gone to Oxford. I'd gone to community college, then nowhere at all when Mother decided my education was a waste of family resources. In my first life, I'd died at 23, broken homeless, from pneumonia in a shelter. My family had attended my funeral in Chanel and Armani, dabbing at dry eyes with monogrammed handkerchiefs. Now, standing in the same hallway where Maya had once accidentally pushed me down the stairs when I was 12, I smiled. The smile felt foreign on my face, like putting on old clothes that no longer fit. But it felt good. It felt like justice. "How did you get my textbooks back?" Maya hissed. And there it was, the admission I needed. She'd taken them, of course, destroyed them, just like last time. Except this time, I'd been ready. Let me take you back 6 months, to the morning I woke up in my 16-year-old body gasping and clawing at my chest, certain I was still dying in that freezing shelter with its broken heating and my broken dreams. My childhood bedroom materialized around me, the pale pink walls I'd always hated, chosen by Mother because girls should like pink. The bookshelf crammed with textbooks and novels, the desk by the window where I'd spent countless hours studying, trying to be good enough, smart enough, worthy enough of my family's love. It had all been so familiar and so impossible. I'd touched my face, smooth, young, unpunished by years of malnutrition and stress. I'd run to the mirror and stared at my 17-year-old self, the self that hadn't yet failed the entrance exam, hadn't yet been disowned, hadn't yet learned that family could be the cruelest word in any language. The memories of my death, my life, came flooding back in waves that made me physically sick. I'd spent that entire first day locked in my bathroom, vomiting and crying and trying to understand what impossible thing had happened to me. Time travel, rebirth, magic. None of the words fit, but the reality was undeniable. I was back, and I had a chance to change. Everything. But first, I had to understand why everything had gone so wrong the first time. Mother had always favored Maya. That was a fact as immutable as gravity in our household. Maya was older by 2 years, blonde where I was dark-haired, outgoing where I was bookish, everything Mother had wanted in a daughter. I was the accident, the unexpected second pregnancy that had ruined Mother's figure and complicated the family dynamic. Father had never contradicted her. He was too busy with his pharmaceutical company, too absorbed in board meetings and merger negotiations to notice that one of his daughters was slowly being erased from the family portrait. When he looked at me at all, it was with a vague confusion, as if he couldn't quite remember who I was or why I was sitting at his dinner table. Maya had learned early that hurting me earned Mother's approval. Small cruelties at first, hiding my homework, telling other children I had lice, accidentally breaking my things. But as we grew older, the cruelties had grown too. She'd sabotaged my first job interview by calling the company and pretending to be me, canceling the appointment and leaving a rude message. She'd stolen my diary and shared it at school, turning my private thoughts into public humiliation. She'd convinced our parents that I was lying when I told them I'd been accepted into the advanced placement program, showing them forged emails that made it look like I'd been rejected. And through it all, Mother had praised her. "Maya is so mature, so sophisticated. Why can't you be more like your sister?" In my first life, I'd kept trying, kept studying, kept achieving, kept hoping that eventually they'd see me, that my grades would speak louder than Maya's lies, that my accomplishments would matter. They hadn't. Because 3 weeks before my entrance exam, Maya had destroyed every textbook I owned, and Mother had refused to buy me new ones. "You should have taken better care of your things," she'd said, not even looking up from her phone. "This is a learning opportunity about responsibility." I'd borrowed Maya's notes, her textbooks, her study materials, and she'd given them to me. Oh, she'd been so generous, so kind, making sure Mother saw her sharing with her poor, careless little sister. What I hadn't known, what I'd only realized too late, was that she'd given me the wrong materials. Notes from the wrong syllabus, outdated textbooks, study guides for a completely different exam. I'd memorized hundreds of pages of useless information while she'd studied from my original correct materials, the ones she'd hidden in her closet. I'd failed. She'd triumphed. And my life had effectively ended at 18, though my body had taken 5 more years to catch up. Now, lying in my childhood bed with my second chance life stretching before me, I'd understood something fundamental. I couldn't just prevent the same disaster. I had to win completely. I had to take everything she'd stolen and everything she'd planned to steal, and I had to do it in a way that would leave no doubt about who was the smarter sister. The entrance exam was 18 months away in this timeline. But I remembered something that Maya didn't. There was an early admission program for exceptional students. Take the exam a year early, score in the top 1%, and you'd get automatic admission plus a full scholarship. In my first life, Maya had tried for it and failed, so she'd never mentioned it to anyone. She'd taken the regular exam a year later and succeeded with my stolen notes. But I could succeed. I had 5 years of additional life experience. Granted, most of it had been horrible, but I'd learned things. I'd matured. I'd studied independently at the library during my homeless months, desperate to understand where I'd gone wrong. I knew the exam inside and out now, and I had 18 months to prepare. Or so I'd thought. 3 days after my rebirth, I'd come home from school to find my room ransacked. My textbooks, all of them, were gone. My notes, my study guides, even my old exam practice books from previous years. Everything. I'd found Maya in her room, door locked, music playing. When I'd knocked, she'd opened it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Did you need something?" "My textbooks. Someone took them from my room." "That's terrible. Have you asked Mother? Maybe she donated them. You know how she's always trying to clear out clutter." But I'd seen it in her eyes, the satisfaction, the cruelty. She'd taken them already. 18 months ahead of schedule, she was already sabotaging me. In my first life, this would have destroyed me. I would have begged Mother for money for new books, been refused, despaired. But I wasn't the same girl anymore. I was a 23-year-old woman in a 16-year-old body, and I'd learned the most important lesson life could teach: trust no one in this house. That night, I'd gone to the library. I'd checked out every relevant textbook they had. I'd made photocopies of the most important pages. I'd photographed every page with my phone and uploaded them to a cloud storage account Maya couldn't access. I'd visited used bookstores and bought older editions of the textbooks. Cheaper, but the core material was the same. And then I'd done something else. Something Maya would never expect from her meek, people-pleasing little sister. I'd installed a keylogger on the family computer, a hidden camera in the study, a recording app on my phone that I carried everywhere. I'd started documenting everything, every cruel word, every sabotage, every lie Mother told Father about me, every time Maya stole credit for my achievements. I was building a case, a record, evidence. Because this time, I wasn't going to just escape. I was going to burn their whole world down. The months that followed were the hardest of both my lives. I studied in secret, at the library, at coffee shops, in the maze, locked bathroom at 3 a.m. I let Maya think she'd won, that I was struggling without my textbooks, that I was falling behind in my classes. I failed tests deliberately, handed in mediocre homework, played the role of the defeated younger sister. Mother was pleased. "Finally, you're showing your true level," she'd said at dinner one night, Maya smirking beside her. It's good to have realistic expectations. Not everyone can be exceptional like Maya. Father had nodded absently, not even looking up from his phone. I'd smiled and agreed and felt nothing but cold, calculated fury. Meanwhile, I was learning everything, not just the exam material, but the patterns of my family's cruelty. I'd discovered that Mother had been embezzling from my trust fund, the one grandmother had set up before she died, meant to pay for my education. She'd been transferring money to Maya's accounts for years, thousands of dollars that should have been mine. In my first life, I'd never known the trust fund existed. I died thinking grandmother had forgotten me too. I'd discovered that Father knew about the favoritism and simply didn't care. He'd told his secretary once, in a conversation I'd recorded, that having two daughters was redundant, and he'd always considered me the spare. I'd discovered that Maya had been planning even more sabotage than just stealing my textbooks. She had a whole timeline written in her diary, which I'd photographed while she was at yoga. Ruin my exam preparation, steal my notes, convince Mother to cut off my allowance, make sure I failed so spectacularly that I'd have no choice but to give up on university and maybe get a nice retail job somewhere. Every discovery had been a knife in my heart. Every piece of evidence had hardened my resolve. And through it all, I studied. God, how I'd studied. Every free moment, every spare minute, I was memorizing formulas, practicing essays, drilling vocabulary. I took practice exams until I could score perfectly in my sleep. I read every recommended text, watched every lecture video, understood every concept from every angle. 6 months into my preparation, I'd registered for the early admission exam using a school computer so the confirmation emails wouldn't go to our house. I'd forged Mother's signature on the permission forms. She'd never notice or care. I'd paid the registration fee from the small stash of cash I'd been hiding, money earned from tutoring younger students in secret. Maya had no idea. Mother had no idea. I'd become a ghost in my own house, invisible and overlooked, which was exactly what I needed to be. The exam itself had been almost anticlimactic. After months of preparation, after years of living with the knowledge of my previous failure, I'd walked through that test like I'd written it myself. The questions were old friends. The essays were conversations I'd been having in my head for half a year. I'd finished with 40 minutes to spare and spent them checking every slide, answer twice, then 3 times, making absolutely certain. When I'd walked out of the exam center, I'd felt lighter than I had since waking up in my second life. Whatever happened next, I'd done everything I could. I'd prepared perfectly, I'd executed flawlessly. Now I just had to wait. The results came 3 months later, on the same day Maya received her regular exam admission confirmation. I'd been checking my email obsessively, and when I saw the message from Oxford University, my heart had stopped. "Congratulations," it began, and I'd had to read it 5 times before I believed it. Top 1%, full scholarship, early admission, conditional offer pending A-level results, which I'd also smashed. I'd done it. Against every odd, against every sabotage, against the weight of my family's expectations and my own previous life's failure, I'd done it. But I couldn't celebrate. Not yet. Because Maya would be getting her acceptance letter today too, and the real performance was about to begin. I'd printed my acceptance letter and waited. I'd heard Maya squeal from the study where she'd been checking her email, heard Mother's congratulations, heard Father's rare praise. The golden child had succeeded again. The family was so proud. I'd waited until they were all in the living room, champagne already opened, before I'd walked in with my letter. "I got something in the mail today too," I'd said quietly. Maya had barely glanced at me. "That's nice. What, a flyer for community college?" Mother had laughed. Father had smiled at his phone. I'd handed the letter to Father. "Actually, it's from Oxford. Early admission program." The silence had been delicious. Father had actually looked up from his phone. Mother had frozen with her champagne glass halfway to her lips, and Maya had gone white as paper. "That's impossible," she'd whispered. "You can't. You're only 17. You haven't even taken the exam yet." "I took it 3 months ago. I scored in the 99th percentile." I'd turned to Mother, letting myself smile for the first time. "Full scholarship. All expenses paid. I start next fall, a year before the regular intake." "But your textbooks," Maya had started, then stopped, realizing what she'd almost admitted. "The ones you destroyed?" I'd asked sweetly. "I bought new ones. Well, used ones. Studied at the library mostly. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you're motivated. Mother had been staring at the letter like it was a snake. This must be a mistake. You've been failing your classes. Your teachers all say, I've been failing the classes that don't matter for the entrance exam, I'd interrupted. Strategic resource allocation? Why waste effort on busy work when I could focus on what actually counts? That was when the real chaos began. Father had demanded to see the letter, then called the university to verify it was real. It was. Mother had insisted I must have cheated somehow, that there was no way I could score higher than Maya. I'd offered to take any test they wanted to give me, right there, right then. Maya had locked herself in her room and refused to come out. The family champagne celebration had curdled into accusation and confusion. How had this happened? How had their failure of a daughter suddenly become exceptional? It didn't fit the narrative they'd built over 17 years. You must have had help, Mother had insisted. Who helped you? Did you pay someone to take the test? I'd pulled out my phone then, the one that held months of recordings. Would you like to hear what you said to Maya last month? About how you were glad I was failing because it made her look better by comparison? Or should we discuss the trust fund grandmother left me, the one you've been embezzling from for 7 years? The color had drained from Mother's face. You're lying. I have bank records, transfer statements, audio recordings of you telling Father how you diverted my education fund to pay for Maya's image consultant and networking opportunities. I've had a lawyer review them. It's fraud, Mother. Multiple counts. Father had stood up then, his face red. You recorded us? In our own home? In my home, I'd corrected. The one where I've been systematically abused and sabotaged for my entire life. The one where my sister destroyed my property to prevent me from succeeding. The one where my mother committed felony theft. Yes, I recorded you, because I knew no one would believe me otherwise. I'd turned to Maya's closed door. And Maya, I know you took my textbooks. I have you on camera entering my room, taking them and burning them in the backyard fire pit. I have your diary entries planning to sabotage me. I have text messages between you and Mother coordinating how to make sure I failed. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Now, I'd continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to Oxford a year early, fully funded. You're going to transfer every penny you stole from my trust fund back into my account with interest. And you're all going to pray I decide not to press charges. You can't press charges, Mother had sputtered. You're 17, you're a minor, we're your parents. I turn 18 in 3 months, I'd interrupted. And I've already consulted with grandmother's lawyer, the one who set up the trust. He's very interested in how you've managed it. In fact, he suggested that perhaps the court should appoint a guardian ad litem to investigate whether I've been the victim of financial abuse. Father's face had gone from red to gray. His pharmaceutical company couldn't afford a scandal right now. They were in the middle of a major merger. Any suggestion of financial impropriety in his personal life could tank the deal. What do you want? He'd asked flatly. I want what was always mine. My trust fund fully restored. A written apology from each of you, which I'll keep for my records. And I want to be left alone. No contact at university unless I initiate it. No showing up to visit, no interference in my life whatsoever. And if we agree? Mother's voice was small, defeated. Then I keep the evidence private. It stays my insurance policy. But if any of you ever try to hurt me again, if Maya ever contacts me with anything other than a sincere apology, if I find out you're spreading lies about me, I'd pause, letting the threat hang. Then everything goes public. The recordings, the evidence of fraud, all of it. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of family you really are. Maya had opened her door then, her face blotchy with tears. You can't do this. This was supposed to be my moment, my achievement. I'd looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. No, Maya, it was supposed to be mine. 6 months ago in this timeline, Years ago in a life you don't remember. This was mine. You just stole it. I'm just taking back what you tried to destroy. I don't understand, she'd whispered. I know you don't. And you never will. I'd turned back to my parents. Do we have a deal? Father had looked at Mother. Mother had looked at Maya. Maya had looked at the floor. Fine, Father had said finally. You'll have your money back within the week, but you're on your own after that. Don't expect any support from this family. I'd laughed then, sharp and bitter. I never have. That's why I've spent my whole life preparing for this moment. I'd walked to my room, packed a bag, and left. I'd been staying with a friend from school whose parents had always been kind to me, who'd seen the bruises I'd hidden and the sadness I'd carried. They'd offered me their spare room when I'd explained I needed to leave home early for university preparation. They didn't know the whole truth. No one could, but they knew enough. That had been 2 weeks ago. Since then, the money had been transferred back into my account, nearly $200,000, my original inheritance plus the interest it should have earned. Father's lawyers had sent a tersely worded letter confirming that all parties agreed to my terms. Maya had sent one email, a rambling mess of self-pity and accusation that I'd deleted without finishing. And today, the official acceptance letters had arrived for both of us. Maya's regular admission to start in 18 months, my early admission to start in 3 months with a full scholarship, with an invitation to join the honors program, with recommendations for student housing and meal plans and everything I'd need to start my new life. The weeks leading up to my departure were strange and dreamlike. I'd moved all my belongings out of my parents' house bit by bit, taking only what was truly mine, leaving behind the pink room and the painful memories. I'd said goodbye to my few real friends, promising to keep in touch. I'd visited grandmother's grave and told her ghost that I'd finally escaped, that I'd finally won. I'd also done something else, something that felt both petty and necessary. I'd sold all my old textbooks. The ones Maya had destroyed had been top-of-the-line current edition, expensive study materials. The ones I'd replaced them with were used, outdated, barely functional. But I'd kept them anyway, and as my departure date approached, I'd listed every single one online. Well-used study materials, the listing had read. Got me into Oxford early admission with top scores. Obviously lucky. $5 per book or £50 for the lot. They'd sold within a day. Some eager student had bought the whole collection, probably thinking they were getting a bargain on proven study materials. I'd taken the 50 Foslers and donated it to a homeless shelter, the same one where I'd died in my previous life. It was a small gesture, meaningless in the grand scheme, but it felt like closing a circle. The textbooks Maya had tried to destroy had been replaced, used, and passed on. Her sabotage had failed completely. I'd won without them, better than I would have with them, because I'd been forced to truly learn the material rather than just memorizing from books. When I'd posted about the sale on my private social media, visible only to a few close friends, Maya had somehow seen it. She'd called me from Mother's phone, screaming, "You sold your textbooks? Those were supposed to be destroyed. You were supposed to fail." "Maya," I'd said calmly, they were my textbooks. I passed my exam. I don't need them anymore. Why do you care? Because you... She'd sputtered into incoherence. "This isn't fair." "No," I'd agreed, and it isn't. It wasn't fair when you destroyed my property. It wasn't fair when Mother stole my inheritance. It wasn't fair when I died at 23 because no one in my family ever loved me. But that's not this life, is it? This life I won. What are you talking about? You died at 23? You're 17. Goodbye, Maya. I'd hung up. She'd tried calling back 17 times. I'd blocked the number. My last week at home, at my friend's house, which had become more of a home than my parents' mansion ever was, I'd spent tying up loose ends. I'd written a long letter to my friend's parents, thanking them for their kindness and promising to pay them back someday when I was established. They'd refused to accept any money, saying I was like a daughter to them. A daughter. The word had made me cry. I'd also received an unexpected visitor, Father's secretary, a kind woman named Helen, who'd always slipped me sad smiles when I came to the office as a child. She'd knocked on the door one evening with an envelope. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she'd said quietly, "but I thought you should have this." Inside the envelope was a check for £50,000 and a letter. The letter was from grandmother, my real grandmother, not the cold woman mother. Claimed had never loved me. It was dated 2 weeks before she'd died, addressed to me, giving instructions that I was to receive this additional sum when I turned 18 or enrolled in university, whichever came first. Your father's lawyer never told him about this clause, Helen had explained. They were supposed to, but I think they forgot. I only found it because I was organizing old files. It's completely separate from your trust fund. It's yours, no strings attached. I'd stared at the check, at grandmother's shaky signature on the letter. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known I'd need this, that my family would fail me, that I'd need resources to escape. Why are you giving this to me? I'd asked Helen. You could lose your job. Because I've watched your father ignore you for 17 years, she'd said simply. And I've watched your mother abuse you, and I'm done being complicit in it. Consider this my resignation. She'd quit the next day. Last I heard, she'd started working for a charity that helped at-risk youth. I'd sent her a thank you card with a donation. The money from grandmother, combined with my restored trust fund, meant I was truly free. I could pay for anything Oxford didn't cover. I could live independently. I could never need to ask my parents for anything ever again. It felt like winning the lottery and escaping prison at the same time. My last night before leaving for Oxford, I'd had a dream, not a nightmare for once, but a dream of my previous life. Or perhaps a memory. I was back in the shelter, back in that cold room with its broken heating and thin blankets. But this time, I wasn't alone. Grandmother was there, sitting beside my cot, her hand warm on my forehead. You get another chance, she'd said in my dream. Use it wisely. I'm trying, Dream Me had whispered. But I'm so angry, grandmother. So angry at all of them. Anger is a tool, she'd said. Use it to fuel your success, not to poison your happiness. You've won, darling. You've already won. Now you just have to live. I'd woken up crying, but they were clean tears, healing tears. That morning, I'd packed my last bags, said my final goodbyes, and taken a train to Oxford. I hadn't looked back. The first semester at Oxford was everything I'd dreamed of in my previous life and more. I'd thrown myself into my studies with a fervor that surprised even me. I'd joined clubs, made friends, discovered that there were people in the world who valued intelligence and kindness over family name and social status. I'd also discovered that I was good at this, not just the academics, though I excelled at those, but at life, at building a chosen family, at being happy. The nightmares of my previous death faded slowly but surely. The anger I'd carried for so long began to transform into something else. Determination, confidence, peace. I'd changed my phone number and email. I'd made my social media private. I'd cut off every avenue my family could use to reach me. For the first few months, they'd tried. Father had sent letters to the university. Mother had shown up once at my dormitory, causing a scene until security escorted her away. Maya had created fake accounts to try to message me. I'd documented every attempt, added it to my evidence file, and sent a cease and desist letter through my lawyer. After that, they'd stopped. The silence was glorious. I'd focused on my studies, on my new life, on becoming the person I was meant to be. I'd made friends who didn't know about my family, who liked me for me. I'd dated casually, nothing serious, just learning how to trust again. I'd joined the debate team and discovered I had a talent for arguing complex points. Years of defending myself against family accusations had apparently been good training. By the end of my first year, I'd earned top marks in every class. I'd been invited to join an accelerated program that would let me complete my degree in 2 years instead of 3. I'd received a research position with one of the most prestigious professors in my field. I'd won. Completely, totally, absolutely won. The summer after my first year, I'd stayed in Oxford rather than returning to London. I'd gotten a job as a research assistant, moved into a small flat with 2 other students, and spent my days working and my evenings exploring the city. It was during this summer that I'd received an unexpected letter. Not email, an actual letter with a wax seal delivered by courier. Inside was a legal document and a note. The document was a death certificate. Mother had died of a heart attack 2 weeks ago. The note was from Father's lawyer informing me that I was not mentioned in the will, that I had no claim to the estate, and that my presence was not required or desired at the funeral. I'd read it twice, waiting for some feeling to emerge. Grief, sadness, relief. But I'd felt nothing. The woman who'd given birth to me had died, and I felt nothing at all. I'd thrown the letter away and gone back to work. 3 days later, another letter arrived. This one was from Maya. "Mother died because of you," it read. "The stress of your betrayal, your lies, your cruelty, it killed her. I hope you're happy. You destroyed our family. Father won't speak to me anymore. He blames me for not stopping you. I've had to defer my Oxford admission because we can't afford it anymore. Something about the company merger failing because of you and your threats. I have nothing now. Are you satisfied?" I'd read this letter more carefully. Then I'd written a response, the only one I'd ever sent to anyone in my family. "Maya," I'd written, "Mother died because she had undiagnosed heart disease and refused to see doctors because she thought it was beneath her. I know this because I had access to her medical records as part of my evidence file, records that show she'd been warned about her condition for 5 years and ignored it. I didn't cause her death. Her own arrogance did. The company merger failed because Father was engaging in questionable practices that came to light during due diligence, nothing to do with me. The stress of potential exposure probably contributed to Mother's heart attack, but again, that's a consequence of their own actions, not mine. You have nothing now because you built your entire life on stolen foundations. You wanted my notes, my achievements, my success. When you couldn't steal them anymore, you had nothing left of your own. That's not my fault, that's yours. I am satisfied, yes. But not because you're suffering. I don't think about you enough to care whether you're suffering. I'm satisfied because I'm free, because I'm happy, because I'm succeeding on my own merits, and because I never have to see any of you again. Don't contact me again. This is your only warning." I'd sent the letter and blocked Maya's email address. I'd never heard from her again. My second year at Oxford was even better than my first. I'd published my first academic paper. I'd been invited to speak at a conference. I'd started dating someone seriously, a fellow student who made me laugh and didn't pry into my past. I'd also started therapy, working through the trauma of my first life and the abuse of this one. My therapist had been fascinated by my claim that I'd lived before, but she'd helped me reframe it as a powerful form of dissociation that had ultimately saved my life. "Whether it was a past life or your mind's way of processing trauma," she'd said, "you used it to survive and eventually thrive. That's remarkable." I'd let her believe what she wanted. The truth, that I'd actually died and been reborn, was too strange to share. It was enough that I was healing. By the time I graduated, early and with highest honors, I'd transformed completely. I was no longer the scared, abused girl who'd woken up in her teenage bedroom with memories of death. I was a confident young woman with a promising career, supportive friends, and a future entirely of my own making. I'd attended graduation alone, which felt appropriate. My chosen family, my former host parents, my Oxford friends, my boyfriend, had thrown me a celebration dinner instead. It was small, intimate, and full of people who actually cared about me. No one wore Chanel or Armani. No one dabbed at dry eyes with monogrammed handkerchiefs. Everyone was genuinely happy for my success. It was perfect. 5 years after my rebirth, I was working as a research consultant for a major pharmaceutical company, ironically, one of Father's competitors. I was well paid, respected, and absolutely loving my work. I'd published several papers. I'd bought a small house in Oxford. I'd gotten engaged to my boyfriend, now fiancé, who knew about my family history and loved me anyway. I'd built a life that was entirely mine, untouched by the people who'd tried to destroy me. One afternoon, I'd received an unexpected phone call from an unknown number. I'd almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello? Is this you?" Maya's voice, older and rougher, had come through the line. I'd frozen. "How did you get this number?" "I'm calling from a hospital." Her voice cracked. "Father is dying. He has to see you, please." I'd thought about hanging up, I'd thought about blocking the number, but curiosity had won. Why? He wants to apologize. She'd started crying. Please, he's my father. He's your father. Don't you care at all? No, I'd said honestly. I don't. He stopped being my father when I was a child and he chose to ignore it. You stopped being my sister when you decided cruelty was more important than family. And now, 5 years later, when he's dying and convenient, he wants absolution? No. Please. Maya, I'm going to say this once, and then I'm going to hang up and never accept your calls again. I don't forgive you. I don't forgive him. I don't forgive Mother, even in death. You all had 17 years to love me, to see me, to treat me like family. You chose not to. You chose abuse. You chose cruelty. And now you want me to absolve you? No. Live with what you've done. Die with what you've done. But leave me out of it. You're a monster, she'd whispered. No, I'd said. I'm just someone who learned that family is what you make it, not what you're born into. Goodbye, Maya. I'd hung up, blocked the number, and gone back to work. Father died 3 days later. I didn't attend the funeral, I didn't send flowers, I did nothing, because to me he was already dead. Had been dead for 5 years, since the day I walked out of that house and never looked back. 10 years after my rebirth, I was 34 years old and sitting in my comfortable home office writing a research proposal that had the potential to revolutionize treatment protocols in my field. My husband, yes, we'd married in a small ceremony surrounded by chosen family, was making dinner downstairs. Our cat was sleeping on my desk. My life was quiet, peaceful, and exactly what I'd wanted. I'd never spoken to Maya or Father again after that phone call. I'd heard through professional circles that Father's company had eventually recovered but never regained its previous prominence. I'd heard that Maya had finally gone to university, a local one, not Oxford, and was working as a teacher now. I felt nothing about these updates. They were strangers to me. Sometimes late at night, I'd think about my previous life, the one where I'd failed, where I'd been destroyed, where I'd died alone and unloved. I'd think about how close I'd come to living that life again, how differently things could have gone if I'd been less prepared, less determined, less angry. But I'd been all of those things, and I'd won. I'd taken back my textbooks, metaphorically and literally. I'd reclaimed my education, my future, my life. I'd graduated early. I'd succeeded, beyond what even I had thought possible. And I'd done it all on my own terms, with my own effort, with no help from the family that should have supported me. The greatest revenge I'd learned wasn't destroying them, it was succeeding without them. It was being happy without them. It was building a life so full and rich that their absence was irrelevant. The final piece of my revenge came unexpectedly, 12 years after my rebirth. I was giving a keynote speech at an international conference, presenting research that was being hailed as groundbreaking. The audience was full of colleagues, competitors, and industry leaders. In the front row, looking older and smaller than I remembered, sat Maya. I'd recognized her immediately, though she'd aged poorly. The confident, cruel girl who'd destroyed my textbooks was gone, replaced by a tired-looking woman in a cheap suit. I'd paused for just a moment, our eyes meeting. She'd looked at me with something I'd never seen in her before. Genuine respect, mixed with deep, profound regret. I'd smiled, not cruel, not victorious, just neutral, and continued my speech as if she weren't there. After the presentation, she'd tried to approach me at the reception. My assistant had intercepted her smoothly. Dr. Winters isn't taking personal meetings during the conference, he'd said politely. You can submit requests through her website. I'd watched from across the room as Maya's face crumpled, as she'd realized that even now, even after all these years, I had nothing to say to her. She wasn't important enough to acknowledge. She wasn't worth my time or attention. She'd left quietly. I'd gone back to discussing my research with colleagues who actually mattered. That night, I'd received an email from her. A long, rambling apology full of excuses and justifications and pleas for forgiveness. She'd written about how hard her life had been since Mother died, how Father had blamed her, how she'd struggled to find her place in the world, how she'd finally understood what she'd done to me. I'd read it once. Then I deleted it without responding. Because here's what I'd learned in 2 lifetimes of experience. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some wounds don't deserve healing. Some relationships don't deserve saving. And that was okay. More than okay. It was necessary. Maya had made her choices. She'd lived with the consequences. And I had made mine, building a life so successful and fulfilling that her existence was nothing more than a historical footnote. 15 years after my rebirth, I sat in my garden, a real garden, behind my real house, which I'd bought with my own money and filled with my own choices, and thought about the girl I'd been in my first life, the one who'd tried so hard to earn love that could never be earned, the one who died believing she was worthless. If I could speak to her now, I'd tell her, "You were never the problem. You were never unworthy. You were never unlovable. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't see value in anything that didn't serve them." I'd tell her, "You're going to die. It's going to be cold and lonely and unfair, but somehow, impossibly, you're going to get another chance. And that chance is going to save you." I'd tell her, "When you wake up back in your childhood bedroom, don't despair, don't doubt, don't hesitate. Take everything they tried to destroy and rebuild it into something they can never touch. Take your stolen textbooks and replace them with knowledge they can never take away. Take your stolen dreams and make them so real they become inevitable." Most importantly, I'd tell her, "You're going to win. Completely, utterly, absolutely win, and it's going to feel better than you can possibly imagine." But I couldn't speak to her. She was gone, dissolved into the past, or perhaps into alternate timelines, or perhaps into nothing at all. All I had was this life, this second chance, this impossible gift, and I'd used it well. 20 years after my rebirth, I was at the peak of my career. I'd published books, I'd won awards, I'd made discoveries that had changed lives. I'd mentored students who were now changing the world themselves. I'd built something that mattered, something that would outlast me. I'd also done something else. I'd set up a scholarship fund at Oxford for students from abusive homes. It was anonymous, I didn't need credit or recognition, but it was substantial. It paid for everything: tuition, housing, therapy, books, everything I'd needed and more. The scholarship was called the Second Chance Fund, and it had already helped dozens of students escape situations like mine. Students who'd been told they were worthless, who'd been sabotaged and abused, who'd needed just one break to prove their potential. Every time I read a thank you letter from a recipient, every time I saw one of them graduate and succeed and build lives of their own, I felt like my rebirth had purpose beyond just my own survival. I was paying it forward. I was making sure that other people got their second chances too, even if theirs came without the supernatural intervention mine had required. It felt good. Better than revenge, better than success. Better than anything except the quiet peace I'd found in my own life. Today, 23 years after my rebirth, making me 40 years old in this life, the same age I would have been if I'd survived in my first life, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a book, old, worn, covered in notes. My calculus textbook, the one from my original set, the one Maya had supposedly destroyed. There was a note with it, in shaky handwriting. "Found this in Mother's things when I was finally cleaning out her storage unit." She'd kept it all these years. I don't know why. Maybe as a trophy, maybe as evidence of your failure, from that timeline where you did fail. I'm sending it back because it was never hers to keep. I'm sorry for everything. I know you'll never forgive me, but I needed you to know that I finally understand what I took from you. Maya. I'd held the textbook for a long time, looking at my teenage handwriting in the margins, remembering the girl who'd studied from it in my first life, the girl who'd failed despite her best efforts. Then I'd smiled and put it on my shelf, not as a trophy or a reminder of pain, but as evidence of how far I'd come. Because in the end, that's what all of this had been about. Not revenge, not even justice, but transformation. I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me, my death, my failure, my family's cruelty, and I'd transformed it into fuel for the best thing that ever happened to me, my success, my freedom, my joy. Maya had tried to take my textbooks. She'd destroyed them, stolen them, used them against me. But I'd graduated early anyway. I'd sold them all, metaphorically and literally. I'd moved on to knowledge and achievements they could never touch. And now, holding that old textbook in my hands, I realized something. I didn't need it anymore. I'd never needed it. Because the real lesson had never been in the books. It was in me. It had always been in me, and no one could ever take that away. I put the textbook back in its box, sealed it up, and donated it to the university library as a historical artifact. Let it help someone else now. Let it be useful in a way it never was in my first life. Then I went back to my garden, my husband, my peaceful life, the life I'd built from ashes and determination and one impossible second chance. I'd won, not because I'd destroyed my family, not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd taken back everything they'd tried to steal, my education, my future, my happiness. And I'd built something beautiful with it. That was the real victory. That was the real ending to my story. And it was everything I'd ever wanted.